It was Saturday evening. The sun had just slipped behind the trees, turning the sky a murky gray, and the neighborhood was settling into that strange quiet only twilight could bring. I pulled into the garage, turned off the engine, and just sat there for a minute. I could still feel the tightness in my chest from the 3-hour drive back from Pittsburgh. Not from stress, but from holding in the truth. The truth was, I wasn't supposed to be here. Lisa thought I'd be staying overnight. Another extended work trip, like usual. I had even staged the email confirming the seminar schedule, timed it perfectly. But I needed to see it for myself. I needed to walk through our house, knowing she didn't expect me. I carried my laptop, duffel bag, and suit over my shoulder as I stepped in through the side door. No, honey, I'm home. Just silence, like I expected. I hung my coat by the front door and walked straight into the kitchen. Everything looked normal. Her tea mug by the sink, the calendar with hearts drawn around certain dates, and the unopened mail I'd stacked before I left. I moved like a ghost, showered, changed into a clean shirt, reheated some leftover stew. I wasn't hungry, but I made myself chew. I didn't want to think too hard. Not yet. Later, I opened my laptop and drafted an email, one I knew would be needed. I backdated it, made sure the server registered it from Pittsburgh, and then powered the device down. I left it on the couch along with my ID badge and phone, all neatly arranged. At 11:42 p.m., I walked back to the garage, got into the car, and drove out of the neighborhood like a man heading to his own funeral. The next morning, around 6:15 a.m., a jogger passing through George Washington Park noticed something off. A black SUV parked at an odd angle near the maintenance trail. Driver's side door open. Dome light still glowing. He jogged a little closer. Blood. On the steering wheel. On the seat. Spattered across the inside of the windshield like a burst balloon. He froze. Took a slow step back. Then another. Reached for his phone, hands trembling, and called 911. When officers arrived minutes later, the jogger was gone. No one ever got his name. The vehicle was registered to me, Mark Evans. No sign of forced entry. No weapon. No body. Just blood. Lots of it. Later that morning, Lisa opened the door in her robe, half asleep and confused. She blinked in the sunlight and asked the two detectives, "Is something wrong?" "Mark's out of town." They exchanged a glance. "Ma'am," one of them said, "we believe something may have happened to your husband." I can only imagine her reaction. The way her throat must have closed. Because technically I was missing. But the truth? I was already 3 steps ahead of them. I'm not sure what shook me more, seeing the blood in the pictures the detectives showed me, or realizing they were treating me like I had something to do with it. It didn't help that I hadn't even known Mark was back in town. When I told them that, Detective Basil Smith just nodded, slowly, like he'd heard it all before. "So, you didn't see him last night?" he asked, his pen hovering over a little spiral notebook. "No," I said. "He told me he had a seminar in Pittsburgh. He was supposed to be back Monday morning." "Then how do you explain this?" They showed me Mark's phone. It had been found in the center console of his SUV, unlocked but wiped. No calls. No texts. The GPS history cut off around 10:30 p.m. Then they showed me the garage security footage from a neighbor's ring cam. It caught the SUV pulling into the driveway just before 8 p.m. I stood there in my kitchen, arms folded, chilled to the bone. I felt like my life was becoming one of those true crime documentaries. "He came home." I whispered. They didn't answer. Instead, they asked to search the house. I said yes. What else could I do? They were respectful, I guess. They took photos of everything. Mark's laptop, sitting on the couch. His duffel bag, unopened. His coat, still hanging in the closet. But then they looked at my car. I hadn't even driven it since Thursday. Detective Smith called me over. "Can you explain the smears on the pedals?" I looked down and felt my stomach twist. There were faint reddish streaks, dried and cracked, like old nail polish. I don't know what that is," I stammered. "I didn't put it there. They didn't arrest me. Not yet, but I could feel their eyes on me. Every question felt like a trap. Did you notice anything strange lately? Any problems in the marriage? Anyone who might want to hurt him?" I told them everything I could think of. That Mark had been distant for months. That he'd been taking longer trips for work. That we'd been in counseling, but barely. I didn't tell them about Blake. Not then. I wasn't ready to say that out loud. After they left, I broke down in the bedroom. Ugly, heaving sobs. I didn't even try to hide it. I wanted to believe he was still alive, that maybe this was some terrible accident or a robbery gone wrong. But that blood, it was too much. The next day, I went down to the station voluntarily. I gave them my shoes, let them take swabs. Just test everything. I told them, I have nothing to hide. It felt like the only thing I could control anymore. What I didn't know was that the real storm hadn't even started yet. 3 days after Mark's car was found, I was called back to the station. Not as a grieving wife. Not even as a cooperating witness. I was a suspect. They didn't say it outright, but I could see it in their posture, in the way they offered water without meeting my eyes. Detective Smith entered the room with a folder in hand. Lisa, we've spoken to Mark's employer. He wasn't attending a seminar last weekend. In fact, his manager said he declined the trip altogether. Said he needed the time for personal matters. My hands went cold. We also spoke with his attorney, Smith continued. Mark was preparing divorce papers. He planned to serve you next week. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. Divorce. He never said a word. Why do you think he didn't tell you? I don't know. I managed. We were trying to fix things. I thought we were trying. Smith slid a USB drive across the table. This came from Mark's lawyer. It's a folder he titled Insurance. Videos. Screenshots. Transcripts. He was documenting your affair with Blake Moore. The air left my lungs. My hands were trembling now. Blake and I, it was just stupid. It wasn't. How long? I looked down. About 7 months. That was the moment everything shifted. Later that afternoon, Blake was brought in for questioning. I didn't see him, but I heard about it from the lawyer we both suddenly shared. He admitted to the affair immediately. Said it started after a dinner party at our house. Said it was passion without attachment, whatever the hell that means. But then he threw in the twist. He claimed Mark knew about the affair and had confronted him once. That Mark even suggested they could settle it like men. Then Blake looked Detective Smith in the eye and said, "You don't think this is all a setup? You don't think Mark wanted this to happen?" When I heard that, I wanted to scream. Blake was always smooth under pressure, too smooth. It didn't matter. The state had enough. The blood in the SUV matched Mark's DNA. The smear in my car? Same. Blake's fingerprints were found on a crowbar in our shed. My Google history showed searches like, "How long does blood last outside?" and "Can someone survive a head wound?" I never made those searches. I still don't know how they got there. None of it mattered. We were both arrested that night, charged with second-degree homicide, conspiracy, obstruction. I remember the moment the cuffs clicked shut. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just kept repeating one thing in my head. "Mark, what have you done to me?" I thought the worst part would be the jail cell, the clanging bars, the cold metal toilet, the stink of bleach and hopelessness. But no, the worst part was the courtroom, the endless eyes, the cameras, the whispering gallery of strangers dissecting every expression on my face. The story had made national headlines by then. Cheating wife and lover kill husband in suburban bloodbath. Our trial began exactly 4 months after Mark disappeared. The district attorney wasted no time. First, they played the 911 call from the jogger. Then they showed images, Mark's car interior, the blood-soaked driver's seat, the faint prints left on the window. A forensic expert said it was consistent with blunt force trauma and panic-level arterial spray. Then came the emails. Hundreds of them. Me and Blake, joking, flirting, mocking Mark. Some of them written the day before he vanished. Then the kicker. A fingerprint match on a crowbar found behind our garage, Blake's thumb clear as day. I kept glancing toward Blake during all this. He stared straight ahead, stone-faced. I wanted him to look at me. Just once. When it was our turn, our lawyer tried to float the only defense we had left, that Mark had orchestrated his own disappearance. But without a body or proof he was alive, we just looked desperate. Blake took the stand first. He was charming. Too charming. He cracked a joke about never being much of a handyman, which fell completely flat. The DA pounced. "So you're saying you slept with your best friend's wife, but had nothing to do with his murder?" "Yes. And you expect this jury to believe that? Blake shrugged. That's the truth. When I took the stand, I felt like I was drowning. I told the truth. That I was ashamed. That I loved Mark once. That the affair was a mistake. I told them I believed, truly believed, he was still alive. That none of this made sense. That it felt like he'd vanished just to ruin us. The DA leaned in. So you're the victim now? No, I whispered. But I'm not a killer. He raised his voice. Then explain the blood in your car, Mrs. Evans. Explain the Google searches. Explain why your husband had a folder titled insurance. I had no answers. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Second-degree murder. Both of us. The moment the verdict was read, Blake didn't move. Didn't flinch. I sobbed. Not just because I'd lost the trial, but because, deep down, a horrible thought had taken root. What if Mark really had done this to us on purpose? Prison was quieter than I expected. Not peaceful, never that, but dull, routine, a kind of slow erosion. The first few weeks, I barely spoke. I shared a concrete cell with a woman who'd stabbed her boyfriend in the neck with a steak knife. She mostly slept or stared into space. I envied her silence. My parents visited once a week. Mom cried every time, and Dad kept trying to fix things, as if a stern phone call to the governor might undo a murder conviction. I told them to stop wasting their money, but they didn't listen. Blake was in a different facility. Maximum security. We were allowed to exchange letters, but after the 3rd week, they stopped coming. Part of me hated him. Part of me missed him. Our attorney filed the appeal, but it was hopeless. The judge's ruling had been clean, legally sound, based on the evidence. And in the absence of a body, the blood was damning. Everyone kept saying the same thing. People don't lose that much blood and walk away. The 2nd month in, I stopped dreaming about Mark. By the 6th month, I stopped hoping he was alive. Then, in our 12th month, a lawyer from the Innocence Project showed up at my prison. His name was Michael. Young, bookish, nervous. He slid a FedEx envelope across the table like it was radioactive. I think you need to see this, he said. Inside was a letter. 4 pages. Handwritten in blocky, rigid strokes. Signed Mark Evans. There were also photographs. Of Mark. Alive. Holding up a newspaper dated just 6 days earlier. A bloody shirt. A utility knife. A voice changer device. Even a hair sample, taped inside a bag. The letter explained everything. His heartbreak. His planning. His rage. He hadn't died. He had disappeared himself. He described parking the car in the park, cutting his own palm to bleed inside the cabin. He'd used pig blood, too, bought from a local butcher. Used rubber gloves to smear it onto the pedals of my car while I was asleep. He left his phone behind and vanished, hitchhiking out of state under a fake name. He only revealed himself now because he was dying. Some kind of aggressive lymphoma. Stage 4. I didn't do this for justice, he wrote. I did it for punishment, and I think you've had enough. Michael sat silently as I read it. What happens now? I asked. He adjusted his glasses. If we verify the letter, the photographs, and the DNA, the state will have to vacate the conviction. I felt sick. Not relieved. Not happy. Just hollow. They tested everything. Ran the DNA. Confirmed the photos weren't doctored. 6 weeks later, the state moved to vacate both convictions. After 14 months behind bars, I walked out a free woman. But I didn't feel free. And I wasn't sure I ever would. The official report from the state didn't give much space to Mark's confession. It called it credible, corroborated, and deeply disturbing. But it was that letter, the one he wrote by hand, that told the whole story. The voice was unmistakably his. Detached. Cold. Not cruel, exactly, but clinical. I discovered the affair on a Tuesday, he wrote. I had just returned from a conference and opened her laptop to find dozens of emails, many of them obscene. Some from the same day I'd flown out. He didn't confront me. Not right away. Instead, he started watching. Saving. Compiling. A digital breadcrumb trail of betrayal. I couldn't stop, he wrote. At first I thought I was building a case for divorce. Then I realized what I really wanted was for them to feel what I felt. Not just betrayal. Not just abandonment. But total helplessness. He admitted he considered killing us both. Said he stood in our bedroom one night with a hammer in his hand while we slept. But I didn't want to be a murderer, he wrote. I wanted to be a ghost. That's when the planning began. He stopped using credit cards, began withdrawing cash in small amounts, bought burner phones, used public Wi-Fi for email routing. He studied blood spatter patterns, read true crime forums, even left staged searches in our browser history, knowing they'd come back to haunt me. The week of his disappearance, he rented a storage unit in Maryland under a fake name. Stocked it with clothes, fake IDs, medical supplies. Even a used motorcycle bought off Craigslist. Then, on the night he returned from Pittsburgh, he followed his own script. He left his laptop and badge on the couch, slashed his palm in the driveway, and bled into the car interior, mixing it with pig's blood. After planting the evidence in my car, he drove to the park, staged the scene, and disappeared on foot. A trucker picked him up outside town and drove him across state lines. From there, he vanished into the underworld of fake names and rented rooms. He didn't reveal where he was writing from, but he did reveal one thing I hadn't expected. I met someone. Her name is Ruth. She knows everything. She helped me with the final package. Apparently, Ruth was a nurse he met at a clinic when he collapsed from internal bleeding. She thought he was homeless, helped him get treatment, fell in love with the ghost of a man who destroyed 2 lives. She wanted me to confess earlier, he wrote, but I couldn't. Not until I knew I wouldn't live long enough to see the consequences. In the end, it wasn't justice that freed me. It was cancer. Mark died 3 weeks before the state formally vacated our sentences. His remains were cremated. No funeral. No obituary. Just a package and a name scrawled in ink. Lisa Evans. You are free now. Do with it what you will. I never responded. I didn't know how. And what would I even say to that? I didn't leave the halfway house for nearly a week after I was released. The world outside felt warped. Too loud. Too bright. I walked into a grocery store and stood frozen in front of a cereal aisle for 10 minutes before walking out empty-handed. Freedom isn't freedom when it's handed to you like a refund for something you never bought. The state issued a formal apology, but only in writing. No press conference. No admission of failure. Just a letter filled with legal hedging and terms like exculpatory evidence and post-conviction relief. They gave me $73,000 as restitution. Barely covered the legal bills my parents had accrued. Blake got out the same day I did, though from a different facility. I saw him once, briefly, in the parking lot of our lawyer's office. He was thinner, paler, looked like someone had taken a file to his edges. We didn't speak, just nodded. I had no interest in revenge, no fantasies about lawsuits or setting the record straight. I didn't even want closure. What I wanted was for the entire story to unexist. But it couldn't. 3 days later, I received a letter. No return address. Just a small, brown envelope with my name on it in the same stiff handwriting as before. Inside, Lisa, I'm sorry for everything. I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I hope you find peace. I never did. This chapter is closed for me. Mark. That was it. No P.S. No explanation. No mention of Ruth. I sat on my back porch, holding that letter, listening to the wind move through the trees. I didn't cry. I didn't burn it. I folded it once, placed it in a drawer, and walked back inside. For the first time in a long time, I made coffee. Not because I needed it, but because I wanted it. I didn't return to my old house. I sold it, moved to a new apartment under my maiden name. I didn't respond to media requests. Ignored every message from former friends. I started volunteering at a local hospice. Quiet, behind-the-scenes work. Washing linens. Delivering trays. Sometimes, when I wheeled a cart down the hallway, I'd see men in hospital beds with that same hollow look Mark had in the photos. And for a split second, I'd feel it again. That crushing mixture of rage and heartbreak. But it passed. I haven't spoken to Blake since. I don't want to. We weren't lovers. We were a shared mistake. I think of Mark sometimes. Not the one who disappeared, but the one I married. The man who used to hold my hand in movie theaters and bring me cough drops when I was sick. That version of him died long before the car in the park. Maybe we all did. The headlines moved on. Eventually, other cases filled the feeds. Other tragedies, real and imagined. But sometimes, when a slow news day hit or a top 10 criminal hoaxes video went viral, our names resurfaced. Not that it mattered. I had already become a shadow of a woman I used to be. No job, no friends, no home I recognized. Just time, and the knowledge that I'd spend over a year paying for a crime that never happened. Blake fared worse. 6 months after his release, I heard he'd moved to Arizona. Tried to rebuild his life. But prison clung to him like soot. I read in a private email from our lawyer that he'd been caught in a prison riot just weeks before his release. Blunt trauma to the ribs, concussion, some damage to his left eye. He'd never said a word about it. I don't know if that was bravery or shame. Detective Basil Smith retired not long after the case unraveled. I found a transcript of a podcast interview where he talked about the Evans affair. He said, "It's the only case I ever got fully wrong. And I mean completely wrong. I trusted the evidence too much. Didn't listen to my gut." The host asked if he regretted it. Smith answered, "Every day." As for D.A. Bagden, he gave a different interview. Dismissive, smug. Said, "Hey, we acted on the facts we had. No system's perfect. Could have been worse. Could have been worse." I sometimes wonder if Mark anticipated all of this. If he knew his letter wouldn't just free us, it would fracture the very system that tried to avenge him. The Innocence Project archived the case under the title, "The Disappearance of Mark Evans, a Cautionary Tale in Judicial Certainty." I read their final report. It was full of clinical language and polite condemnation. But one line stuck with me. This case represents not just the failure of truth, but the weaponization of it. They called Mark a genius of misdirection. A man whose revenge required no bullet, no body, no grave, only a little blood, some silence, and the willingness to let others suffer. I no longer speak his name. Not aloud, not even to myself. But when I see women like me, eyes half shut, shoulders slightly hunched, still trying to scrub the stain off their lives, I feel a bitter kinship. I don't know if I'll ever fully heal. I don't even know what healing would look like. All I know is this: I didn't kill my husband. He just made damn sure the world thought I did.